Welcome to the newest episode of Shattered Trinity. This is episode 4, and we are going to talk about the Mesmer class today, and we're going to knock it down and knock it out as we get started with it. So, joining me is my co-host, Pax. We've been gone for quite a while, haven't we?
Yeah, certainly has been a amount of time.
So, I guess it's been a couple months. I mean, what have you been up to?
Oh man, just college stuff, getting ready for work, but I've mostly been playing some betas for like games like Dota 2, and I got Blacklight Retribution, and I've also been playing, unfortunately, Tribes Ascent. There we go. That was gonna escape me for a second, and just been doing that mostly for the majority of my time.
Well, sounds like a good thing. Doesn't sound like a bad way to spend some time right now. So let's go ahead and get started here. And what we're looking at mostly right now is the Mesmer class, which we were recently introduced to. And they've given us some pictures here to look at, different things of the Mesmer class. And it's looking quite interesting. Possibly one of my most favorite classes that I've seen so far. But they start with the website, and on their website they start with, "When I'm done with you, you won't trust your own mind." Right there, it's a pretty good quote, I'd say. It's pretty interesting. But let's look at mostly what they said they're going to talk about. And I've sent you some information with it, but it looks like we are focusing on the illusions with the Mesmer. And the illusions apparently can be directed at a specific target as opposed to one person, but everybody can see it. So it's for one target, but focused to everyone can see it. They exist as long as the target is alive, and it can only be dispelled by attacking the illusion itself. I mean, right there, attacking the illusion itself. Do you think that means that if you kill the person who created the illusion, that the illusion stays?
That's a really good question, actually. It does say that the person who has the illusion, it would stay alive until that person dies, but I don't know if that means the caster as well. I would honestly kind of hope that if the caster dies, that they would die as well. Otherwise, you just see like a group of Mesmers summoning a bunch of illusions. You can maintain 3 at a time, and that would just get a little out of hand, I think, unless they were a little bit weaker than they sound like they are.
Yeah, and as you just said, you can maintain 3 of them. Well, I mean, let's talking about the strength of them. There are 2 types. The 2 types are clones and phantasms. So we have 2 types to go along with, and as the name implies for clones is very simple. We know them as clones. They look like the person, and they carry the same weapon as the person. These clones have low health and little damage, and an example of they had is like a Mesmer with a sword has 2 clone skills, which is interesting. A Mesmer with a sword has 2 clone skills, Leap and Illusionary Leap. Leap allows them to leap forward, leaving their clone behind them. An Illusionary Leap sends the clone forward and them staying behind. With it being little health and little damage, what do you see being useful with clones? Say the example has been given is with the sword. So what usefulness do you see there being with a clone with little damage, little health, and these 2 leap abilities?
Well, immediately, I don't really see the clone as being the most useful thing out of this, but you get a free leap, and that can be really useful for avoiding damage, just getting out of a bad situation, especially if you can leap or send your illusion leap. Let's say you actually trick your opponent for a moment, that just buys you 1 more second, then you can actually leap away towards a teammate, or, someone who has knockdowns or something like that. If they do a little bit of damage too, though, that could sting as well. I know that some spells, I don't know how it is for Guild Wars 2, but sometimes the more people that are in an area, you take reduced damage, or sometimes AoE. Or if you have a bunch of clones on top of you, they may not know exactly who to target if you don't have, like, pretty good health.
Well, see, that's the other thing I wanted to we'll get to the video of some of these skills later on. I'm not sure if they don't show us. Maybe they don't show us the clone one, but as far as the video shows later on, they don't look exact. They're like these glowy purplish things, but maybe that's the phantasms. Which, speaking of these phantasms, these things, they look like the caster, but they have their own name and special illusionary weapons. So, and these special weapons give them more powerful, so they have more health and more damage. So these seem like something that might be a bit more useful. But the example they give is a staff Mesmer. So a Mesmer who's carrying a staff can summon an illusionary mage that attacks its targets and deals extra damage for each inflicted condition. So, looking at the phantasms, first, out of the examples, the first one, the clones, gave us an example with them with a sword and giving you 2 clones, and one with the staff. So, is it possible that we're looking at the fact that if you have a sword, you can only do the low health and little damage ones, the clones, but if you have if you're using a staff, then you can summon these stronger phantasms, maybe?
I hope not, and it doesn't really seem to come off to that for me. I think they've just kind of mentioned the leaps, because let's say you are using swords, that illusionary leap is going to be really useful to you because you can close the distance on the enemy really fast, whereas a staff Mesmer, you know, maybe it may not be as ideal to have Mesmers that use swords and you have a staff, unless they're going to leap at them with a staff. I mean, they're already ranged, so I feel like that's probably why they organized that way, but who knows, you know, maybe they have some kind of master plan I'm not aware of.
Yeah, I mean, it could be possible, the fact that they each, no matter what, you get clone and phantasm options. They're just giving us examples. Hey, you're using a staff, here's the type of a phantasm that you can summon. And maybe there's a sword phantasm that we just don't know about right now. So, who knows. Moving on, though, they go into what they call these mantras. All right, and these are something besides their illusions. They have their illusions and they have their mantras. And the mantras are really powerful abilities, apparently. They come in 2 phases. The first phase is this long cast time, which gives you, I guess you can say it's kind of like a channel, or it's a charge is what it is. You're charging something up. And then you get an instant skill along with that. So when it charges up, it gives you an instant skill. And what's cool about this is you don't have to use that instant skill immediately. So you can charge up your mantra before you go into the battle. So say we're in a PvP match, and I guess at the start of it, right when it starts, you can start loading up your mantra and then run off into the battle. And the way they said is that this instant skill can be used in the middle of another spell without interrupting that spell. So then with the example of the mantra of pain, as they call it, seems like it's a skill in the game, can be charged into an instant damage power spike that can be used during a channeled spell, such as the Great Sword skill. So, once again, our Mesmer, first off, at this point has been using a regular sword, a staff, and now a great sword, which is kind of cool in and of itself that we get the options, and you get different skills with it. But this great sword channeled spell that you can be using, and then you can do an instant damage power spike to that if you had pre-charged your mantra of pain. So, this one I'm really interested in. Do you see this being a big game changer in PvP matches?
And more damage, definitely. You know, in the first Guild Wars, they had their strongest spell, in my opinion, was just that backfire before people start curing it in time. You know, just getting rid of the hex. That had such a huge damage spike, and if you can just do that now, they're adding more like other ways to damage your opponent without just draining their energy, just doing raw damage and tricking your opponents and closing the distance on them. I can actually see, like, with what they've said so far, the sword Mesmers being a lot more powerful than they were. And I really like the mantra pain so far. The fact that you can just, like, charge that up, like, who knows what kind of damage that's going to add, but just adding it on, you get a nice little cooldown on that, and you add it to a really nice weapon, and that's going to do some nasty damage for sure.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if you can. I mean, they haven't told us exactly, but I'm wondering if like the way it's designed is where you can have like one clone, one phantasm, or maybe you got to choose between them what you're carrying with you, one mantra, and then you got your weapon spells, or something like that. I wonder if that's what it is. I wonder if we have to pre-choose. Like, do you want this mantra of pain, or do you want the mantra of, I don't know, defense or health or something like that that goes along with it? Maybe it's focused. It doesn't sound like the mantras are focused on the weapons at all, and possibly even the illusions themselves. I really don't think those are focused on the weapons at all. I think the weapons have their own skills, and then you can use these illusions and mantras in cohesion with it. But I'm wondering, I mean, the Mesmer sounds like it can be pretty powerful, but how long do you think these mantras are going to last? It just told us long cast time. Do you think it's going to be 1 second, 2 seconds? Do you think you need to get out of combat for a moment to recharge your mantra if you've already used it once? Or do you think it's a charge in the beginning of the fight and you probably won't be using later?
I think, well, they said and instant skills. I feel like you're gonna have a long cast time ready for initial burst, but it's gonna be more probable that people will use the instant version of it if you can do it like that. That sounds like what it is, because you're just charging up to a certain strength limit, and I'm sure there's a minimum power, and you just keep using it throughout the fight because you don't want to lose your DPS or
Well,
or even your presence.
actually, the thing with that is that it's not that it's an instant skill. It's you have a long cast time, which activates into an instant skill. So you have this like charge up that you charge it and stuff, and then when you charge it, it changes the skill, I guess, on your skill bar into the new instant skill that you can go into combat with and activate whenever you want to.
I see, I see.
So,
well, I'll definitely have to see how that works out, but I'm sure it'll be in a way that will be, well, I mean, it would be kind of pointless to have a one-time ability, you know, that you only get used once before the fight. So I have a feling that they're going to include it somehow to be much more.
do you think it'll be interruptible?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you think that this charge skill, the Mantra, will be interruptible? You're charging it, somebody hits you and it interrupts it, or do you think it's going to be like we're seeing a lot of times in MMOs now, where it doesn't fully interrupt it, but it like knocks a second off and has to redo that second or something like that?
Yeah, it sounds like if it does have a long cast time and that you can't really have it as an instant skill, it's going to be interruptible. I don't know if there is a time where it's like, you know, it's like half charge, but your ability finally got to change, or if it's going to be you have to complete it, then you get your new skill. But if it is a full, long cast time, then I definitely can see that being interrupted. But, like I said, I haven't really seen too much of these mantras yet, so I'll just keep watching them. But they sound very interesting. They did have mantras before, but nothing quite like this.
Alright, well, let's move on into the weapons of the Mesmer. And as we know, our show is called Shattered Trinity, the idea of getting rid of the set way you have to play in the game. And to go along with that, it looks very obvious that the devs of Guild Wars 2 over at ArenaNet had decided to make those options available to players. And something new introduced, I think, into Guild Wars 2 is this dual wielding. There wasn't dual wielding in Guild Wars 1, was there?
Not initially. Then they got the assassins, and then you had the Mesmer blades.
Well, the assassins. Did the Mesmer able to dual wield or something for a while? Or was it just the assassins? If you had to have them as a subclass, maybe.
No, you had to have the assassin. Well, you could be using the blades as a Mesmer because the damage on the weapon didn't really matter. So some Mesmers would use the illusionary weapons or weaponry and have little daggers on them.
Oh, okay. Well, anyways, looking at this, it looks like they have several options. Your main hand can be one of two options. If you're going to dual wield, your main hand's either going to be a sword or a scepter. And your offhand will be a focus item, a pistol, a sword, or a torch. So looking at that alone, we are looking at the possibility of multiple items here. I mean, the sword or scepter is your main hand, so I'm guessing that's going to be your main damage use. Either a sword or I guess it's a short staff is what a scepter you consider. And the offhand is your focus, which I know they had in Guild Wars, and then a pistol, another sword, or this one confuses me, or a torch. What do you think of those weapon options there for the main hand and offhand?
The torch is kind of interesting. Like, sword and scepter for the Mesmer. I mean, that's pretty normal for the sword and scepter. And then the pistols are a new addition, so I can see Mesmer, anyone using a gun really. But the torch is kind of an interesting standing out thing there. And then I'm really liking the fact, personally, that Mesmers can use great swords. That just sounds like a whole lot of fun to be happening.
Well, I have a feeling that the torch is probably just a PvE purpose, maybe. Maybe there's some darker areas and dungeons you need to carry a torch around. Not that we're going into PvE, but that kind of sounds interesting. Actually, if the dungeons are going to be dark enough, you need a torch.
You can just tell your enemies.
Maybe you can set them on fire. And going to PvP, run up to somebody and just go, boom, you're on fire. What now? And as you just said a moment ago, the great sword, yeah, the two-handed weapon is the other options besides the dual wielding, which you can have a staff or a great sword with it. And we're going to see the great sword and staff both in use here later on. I think it's really cool the fact that you can be this Mesmer class that we have and actually go in and fight with this huge great sword. It's not something we're used to, but once again, ArenaNet's trying to get rid of this Trinity mind focus, and we're going to see how that goes. All right, so let's continue on with conditions. Conditions have been added into the oh, it's not added, but conditions is confusion for the Mesmer. Mesmers bring a new condition to the battlefield, and it is confusion. But what's unique about this is it takes damage each time they activate the skill, and activate a skill. That's the enemy. So if the enemy gets confused, it takes damage each time they activate a skill. But here we go, and I wanted to see your input on this. In PvP, this could be dangerous, and it may be removed. I don't know. Condition stacks in intensity. No limit mentioned.
I mean, I wonder if that means you can have several Mesmers, and I'm sure they'll keep spells like Empathy and Backfire, which return damage from doing certain actions, and you just have, like, 20 Backfires on one guy. I definitely like the sound of that, because I really like games where people can drop fast if they're not taken care of. Like, I like a good core team game, but I also like to have fun as like a solo PvPer, and this could go either way. But with Mesmer's, Mesmer has some really crazy debuffs. I'm really interested to see where this goes.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like the Backfire skill has essentially been replaced with this whole idea of confusion. Maybe there's different ones that take longer to cast, something like that, or instant ones, I don't know. But, I mean, each time you activate a skill, you take damage. Interesting enough, but let's add in the fact that they've added in Shattering into the equation for Mesmers. And these special abilities can shatter the illusions on them, and Shattering will destroy all illusions and create a secondary effect. So there are 4 different shatter skills going along with this. So you have to think, I guess, in the PvP sense, depending on what you put on them, or depending on which shattering skill you use, is going to have a different effect. What does your team need, and what does it have? So we have Mind Rack, which destroys your illusion and does damage to opponents near them. All right. Cry of Frustration destroys your illusions and gives the confused condition to a nearby foes. Diversion destroys your illusions and stuns nearby foes. And Reflection destroys your illusions and places a barrier around the Mesmer, wow, which reflects enemy projectiles. What do you think of these? This shattering effect, these 4 different options here. I mean, if we look at them, we're looking at a damaging one, a transfer the confusion, a stun nearby foes, and a defensive one.
It's really hard to pick apart from these, not without seeing numbers, because that damage could be really nice if you're a melee Mesmer and you're up in their face, and then 2 of your illusions blow up, or 3 of your well, it says, I guess illusions count as your phantasm as well, so potentially 3 extra bursts, like explode on one enemy, huge burst. Or you can try jumping into an entire group using the Cry of Frustration, and everyone's confused and gets damage from their abilities. But that stun sounds really nice for sure. Stuns are always good, and I can see that being really useful. And then the Reflection, making a barrier around the Mesmer which reflects enemy projectiles. I wonder if that's like an actual barrier, like your teammates walk in that. What happens if an enemy walks into that barrier? Or is it just a self-barrier? So there's a lot of questions to ask for that. I can see Reflection being a lot better for a PvE purpose, but I definitely, if I had to choose one right now without seeing numbers, I like the sound of that stun. Stuns are always good.
Yeah, we know stuns are good from some other games we've played. But looking at them, I guess if you want instant damage, I guess the way you can view it is Mind Rack I see as an ability you use when the enemy's almost dead, and you need that little extra damage to them. Boom, blow up, they're dead. Okay, took care of them. The confused condition to nearby foes. I'm not sure what the purpose of that is. Maybe you couldn't get casted on that person, or maybe somebody else is dealing more damage and you want to confuse them now instead of the other person. Maybe that's better for PvE, probably. The stun one is the stun one, simple as that. Nice. And there's a barrier, like you said. That's a very good question. Is it a huge barrier that your teammates can jump into as well? I doubt it. It's probably individual barrier. And I can see it being quite useful at, say, a range character is starting to deal so much damage at you and you need to pull up a barrier real quick to do things. So it looks like there's individual choices here, and then there is what's going to help my team. And the stun seems to be the one that helps the team the most out of them. So let's move on now, and and get through the main part of today, which is the actual skills of the Mesmer they gave us little videos for. And these skills, there are 5 of them that we're going to look at. And let's go ahead and start with the first one, which is called Veil. So, they showed us how this ability can work in PvE, but let's talk about PvP here for a moment. This Veil, this ability to enshroud your entire team and make them invisible. And if you're like me, as soon as I saw this recently, I was thinking about the League of Legends character who can throw the stealth on the ground and she jumps into it and is able to shroud herself in that little area. And that's what this looks like. You can shroud yourself, but yourself and your team. This one's questionable and could... what's your opinion on it, first off, before I ask any questions? What's your opinion on this skill?
It does kind of remind me of Akali as well. It's definitely, I mean, an AoE stealth. I wonder, you know, how it's going to appear to the enemy. I'm sure, like, they're going to see the invisible area probably. Then when you walk in, they can't see you. They lose vision. So that's really good for targeting, you know. And especially, I'm very curious what happens when you interact with another object that's outside the barrier, like you're ranged and you're attacking outside of the circle. Is that going to reveal you for a second, or are you just going to be totally invisible? If that is the case, that is going to be a very powerful spell.
I can definitely see a range attacking being a possibly huge issue in this situation from inside the skill if they're able to stay invisible. But what do you think about, I mean, what I can see is I can see an enemy putting down the Veil on the ground, and if I was an enemy player, I'd look at them and go, okay, you are dumb. I'm going to use an AoE ability right there and damage all of you. It's very much a, okay, you're invis, sure, but I know exactly where you are because you're not moving outside that circle.
It was a pretty big circle.
You see it as a pretty good opportunity. I mean...
I would definitely throw down my AoE while I'm running up to them if you know we're in that circle, but I'm not going to deny the strengths of that invisibility, that you can do some really powerful stuff with that, just not being able to be targeted by single effect abilities. That's going to be very powerful if it does last for a good amount of time, but by that video, honestly, it didn't look like it lasts for too long, so I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, it is kind of like a switch back and forth. It's a win-loss ratio. I mean, I'm going to assume that when you attack from inside of the circle, it makes you visible again. Does it make your entire team visible? I don't know. But regardless, just the fact that you can put it down, they can't single target you, and you can go out in any direction is powerful enough in the fact that you can really surprise your enemy, especially if Guild Wars 2 is going to have this whole positional situation. They're dodging and they're rolling and stuff like that. Could be deadly. So let's look at the next skill. They call it Mirror Images. So just from seeing this, I'm going to say right now that I'm pretty sure we just saw a couple things. We saw clones in use, looked like them, had the same weapons, and we also saw the shattering effect I think they're at the end where he shattered his clones and it dealt the damage to him. And then a slow. So I guess this is mirror images is one of the clone abilities is what I'm going to guess. I don't think I saw a leap. Was there a leap involved there?
I did not see leap, but this was the it did summon two at once. It sounded like the leap was just like he would leap and choose to have an illusion in his place, or an illusion would leap to that target. So I think this is a different ability than that. But we did see the two clones and the shatter, or at least appear to be the shatter. That's what they seem to be doing. And I know they like to show the abilities and the mob dies. I wonder how much damage it would actually do to a player, you know?
Yeah, and I'm wondering, like, I mean, if it's a clone, as I said, it deals less damage, low health, or whatever. It still makes me question, like, you saw it there. When they were attacking, they turned into this little pinkish, purplish look or whatever. If that's happening in PvP, are we going to have people starting to just ignore them? Oh, they're dealing little health, they have low health and they're doing little damage, I might as well ignore them or whatever, and keep attacking the main target. Are they distraction purposes, or are they just for a little bit extra damage purposes? I can't tell. In PvP,
definitely seems to be utility of the Mesmer. If everyone can see that, the pinkish form, when they start appearing, then people very well may start ignoring them. But the thing is that they might get AoE down, perhaps, if they can do damage to a player and the targets, because the abilities they can do with them, you know, the stun, that's not something to mess around with. If a Mesmer's can do really good damage to you, has like a mantra ready, and they're about to stun you or do huge damage to Mind Rack on top of an Elementalist, that's a pretty big threat, in my opinion. So it all comes down to the actual shattering abilities that the Mesmers will have, and the real ability they may do. You know, maybe they'll add 10% damage, maybe they do really low damage, but it's enough to be a threat. I can't say right now.
Well, I will agree with one thing. Like, we know in League of Legends that we ignore Shaco's little, his double gang, whatever he calls it, his double that he creates in there, which is sort of like that in a sense. Of course, the thing is, if you attack Shaco's little extra, it deals damage to you when it blows up. But I guess the fact that there is shattering effects in this game, that in and of itself is a reason to clear out those clones, I think, ahead of time. Especially if you're in a group, and you're near your teammates, getting rid of those clones could be a difference between your entire team being stunned and killed, and them being able to survive and push the Mesmer out.
Yeah, we also did not see the special Phantasm, which could be potentially more powerful, but I still think the clones are more of a utility. Like, that leap is really nice, but they're not going to be tricking anyone.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the next skill called Chaos Storm. So, can I be the first to say that looks a little bit of badass, maybe? we got a little Mesmer here who's got a staff, two-handed staff, and decides to throw up what's called Chaos Storm amongst these enemies, and it looks like they had different effects. I'm kind of confused there. I saw 3 different effects go along with this afterwards. So, just in a general fact, it looks like it's an AoE ability of this electricity storm going around. Do you think this is a confusion type ability? Possibly?
Yeah, it definitely looked like it had multiple effects on each person. So it is called Chaos Storm. I know they did have Chaos Storm in Guild Wars. It was a little bit different from that, but I'm sure it's going to have some kind of base damage and maybe possibly a random effect, or they just did that for show. I'm not quite sure, but it looked pretty awesome.
Well, all I can say is that if you are a staff user, I'm going to assume it's one of the abilities you're going to be using. And if it works in PvP and the team decides to group up against you, well, they might be in for some problems. I wonder how many enemies it can affect, though. We saw 3 there. Do you think 3 is the maximum, or do you think it could affect an entire team?
If it's an AoE, it probably will affect an entire team. It's also interesting, I noticed at the end, she seemed to use a spell that set someone on fire. So, I don't know what that was about. But she also had, like, the teleport ability? Like, we should just... There was a lot of stuff about Mesmer right now that's just, like, popping up and brings a lot of questions to ask. They look pretty powerful.
Yeah, it didn't show. Like, she throws the Chaos Storm down, and I thought that was just it. All of a sudden, she flashes to another point, which does not look like Portal that we're going to get to here in a little bit. She suddenly flashes through them. She sets one on fire. She did, like, something else on another one. So maybe she was adding in other conditions or something while they were there. Maybe the Chaos Storm. I mean, maybe you can shatter the confusion. It's a condition. It says shattering illusions, though, so I guess you can't. I don't know if you can shatter a condition or not. So who knows? We could shatter conditions in Guild Wars, couldn't we?
Yeah, you could shatter. Yeah, actually that was. I'm trying to remember though. I remember Necromancers had the shatter ability, but that was for blessings. So I think Mesmers did have that for their own conditions.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next skill called Mind Rack. To start, I'm pretty sure we just saw the Phantasm here. If she's carrying a sword and a pistol, and yet the clones that she created look similar to her, but they both had their own illusionary pistols instead. So they were dual pistol wielding. So that's going to bring me to think that, first off, this was the example of the Phantasms right there. And then we also saw a shattering effect there at the end, which also looked like another one of the, well, actually, that was right there. That was the focus. So the illusion was a phantasm, and Mind Rack, which we actually talked about, was one of the shattering abilities. Destroys your illusion, does damage to opponents near them. So there was a perfect example right there of that, how that shattering ability works. So what do you think?
I think it was funny that it was Mind Rack for that video, and yet they had that awesome like dual wielding pistol shooting thing going on. But we definitely saw it, and it happens very quick. I like that. It's very fast ability. It's not like something you have to really cast, and it seemed like, like I said, it's another video where they're showing an example of the ability, so we don't really truly know the damage that it's going to output or how much of it could differ in PvP. But I like the speed of it, I like the idea of it. You have a couple clones, you throw them on someone, a little bit of extra damage, and then you can get clones again later in the fight. It's a good finisher, I think. It's almost like an execute, or it could be a good opener as well.
Yeah, I have to agree on that. Alright, well then let's go ahead and get to this last ability. My favorite ability with the Mesmer that I've seen so far. And it reminds me of a little game that I'm not going to mention. But let's go ahead and move into it. So, first things first. Mesmer with a great sword? Yeah, that's it. That's about all I can say there. That's all we need to say.
That was the first thing that came to my mind when that came on.
Mesmer with the great sword.
I definitely see why they got rid of dual classic now. I can imagine a healer with freaking teleport, like using portal, just going down.
So, he went through it twice, and it was still up. Though they didn't say, but I wonder if the portal ability stays up for a limited amount of time, number of uses, or it stays up infinitely.
Or if teammates can use it.
They have said teammates can use it, and teammates can be knocked back through it. Actually, if the enemy does a knockback and they land on the portal, it sends them through.
Huh.
But you cannot send an enemy through it, is what it said. Can't knock an enemy through it. An enemy can't use it, and you can't use any skills through it. So it's simply a transport ability, but it can be used by you and your teammates.
I definitely would think it's gonna have a timer on it, even though you can't use it multiple times. I just don't see that lasting for a long period of time. That would be absolutely crazy, like just get in and out of the fight like that. And if they have the classical, Guild Wars thing where you have flag runners, depending on the distance that portal can give you, that can buy you an extra maybe 8 seconds of running every single time you do a run.
Oh, I can definitely see a few teams of Mesmers just laying down these set of portals, and teams jumping around on them. Like I could almost see strategies being developed in PvP with a team with 2 Mesmers on it, and placing portals around the field for the teams to jump around with ranged characters and attack from. And that's the focus of those Mesmers is to maintain those portals while the others use their range abilities. But going back to what we saw outside this portal ability, we saw what was given us in our example earlier of a great sword using Mesmer using a channeled ability. You saw right there, kind of like, and it was floating. If you didn't know, the sword was floating when he was doing it. But that was a channeled ability. It looks like of this ranged channeled ability with a great sword. First off, we got a melee weapon doing a ranged attack that's channeled. Pretty cool. And I'm guessing we could have used our spike there from the mantra if it had been there. I didn't see anything to show us that he used the mantra, so he probably didn't. But I guess it's a time when you could have used it. So let's put it this way. Which weapon would you like to use in Guild Wars 2 if you were playing the Mesmer class?
Well, ideally, I would say the greatsword just because it looks really nice, but I'm always trying to get the best weapons in game, so I haven't played yet. I don't really know it for sure, but I'm gonna say like the pistols look really nice, the greatswords look nice, but staffs usually they're reliable in most games. But even like a sword scepter can be usable. But greatsword looked awesome, and if you have some really cool abilities you can do with that, you can jump around. I'm definitely all for that.
Well, it definitely seems awesome. I'm not sure which I would use either. I think they both have benefits. Of course, all the weapons have different skills, and the idea here is what do you need when? And you can switch weapons in the middle of the combat. So that in itself might be interesting in PvP, depending on the situation, switching between a ranged weapon to say, the main hand or offhand. But either way, overall, what do you think about the Mesmer in PvP?
They definitely look a lot different from the Guild 1, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. They have more utility now. Before, they were all about the debuff, or you multi-class to get the fast cast to do some kind of special job. But now, like, they're more like, straight up brawlers. Some of them are actually going to be in your face all the time. I don't know if there's so much about interrupt anymore as they are as getting conditions on you, and each of those conditions to just beat you down very quickly and then bursting you with some kind of shatter ability. They're really different, and I'm just interested to see how it's going to play out, especially the clones. I don't know exactly if they have like 2 leaps. They have their illusionary leap, they can have that little dash ability we saw earlier, and they have portals. They're going to be so mobile. They'll be like the new assassin in my opinion. That's insane that they can have that many jumps.
I will have to say and agree with you that in Guild Wars 1, the Mesmers were based on interrupts and conditions and stuff. Things that you couldn't really see just applied onto them. And a lot of people were wondering, like, if the Mesmer is the final class, before they had mentioned it before, people were questioning, if the Mesmer is the final class, how are they going to be able to visually appeal to everything? And I want to say, ArenaNet has done a pretty good job coming up and switching how the Mesmer plays, yet keeping the idea of him alive. I'm very satisfied with what we've seen, and I'm hoping to see more here in the future with them. So, will Mesmer be one of your first classes or no?
I'm still a little bent on the elementalist. They look really awesome. They have their own jump abilities that look sweet. But I may look into Mesmer when the game actually initially releases, and who knows, maybe Mesmer will end up crushing. I don't know if it's gonna be rock paper scissors or not. I like to think it's gonna be more skill based, but if they can still put on really large damage confusion additions or conditions, and they can stun me and they can just jump on me, I can't escape them. That's gonna be a pretty big threat that may make me change my mind.
Well, I will say after I've seen it recently, I am pretty sure I'm going to go with the little guy, Asura, as a Mesmer, and then and get my second character will probably be a Necromancer. But it's going to depend on what my team wants to do, who I'm running with, because it needs to be PvP viable. It needs to have a pretty good team. But that just about does it. So, those of you who joined us, or those of you who watch us on YouTube or wherever, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for watching us, and be ready. Each week we are going to release a new episode of Shattered Trinity going over the PvP viability of each class. This is our first of a series of many. We started with the Mesmer since they're the most recent, and we're going to work our way backwards. So thank you for joining us today, and you can follow Pax on Twitter at @the1pax. And is there anywhere else they can follow you, or anything else you'd like to say before we end?
I mean, I guess I do have my own Twitch TV channel, which is Twitch TV/Paximator. So if you want to go look up some videos, I have some. Haven't really been posting too much, trying to upgrade my setup, but feel free to come and talk with me, or PvP. I'm only PvP with people, and I'll give you a few tips even if you need it.
All right, and you said that you were moving. When are you moving?
I will be moving in actually, I think it's 5 days now, so pretty soon, but I should be set up within the same day.
So you're going to be set up for, are you going to be be able to do an episode next Saturday possibly?
That should be fun, yeah.
Alright, and if you can follow me at JK Kennedy, JK Kennedy 26, that's actually incorrect on there. Please add 26 there at the end. I will include it in the information. I made that bar wrong. My own Twitter name. Or you can follow me at my website, justingaming.com. It has all the links to everything, and the Twitter one is correct on there. It has my Twitch channel, Twitter, YouTube, Google+, Facebook page will be added onto it soon once I've got a public Facebook page to put on there. But either way, thank you for joining me. I am Justin. This is Pax. We are glad to have you watching, and hope you are excited about Guild Wars 2 PvP just as much as we are. Have a good day.
See ya.